some volunteers here helping us out here this morning, and we really appreciate you being here. My name is Terry. I do work for Keep Phoenix Beautiful, which is a local affiliate of Keep America Beautiful. We have 4 major goals. One is anti-littering, and we provide buckets and gloves and picker-uppers and for that kind of a thing. We also do volunteerism, which is why some of you are here today. We do recycling, which is my job, and we provide recycling opportunities that the city cannot fulfill. So we have, I do running races, block parties, things, smaller things, not these big Super Bowl kind of things. So we don't do that. But we provide that. And then the last thing that we do is beautification, of which, for that umbrella, the gardens come under that. Old story, new for some of you. We used to be at Central and Indian School at our garden over there. We got kicked off about 8 years ago now. We ended up here and up at Mountain View Park, which is 7th Avenue in Peoria. So those are the 2 gardens. He wants me to hurry up. Anyway, so that's who we are. Now, we can't function without donations and volunteers. You know, that's what we're always after, is trying to make a few bucks here and there. Everybody that has a garden here, they lease it for about $5 a month. And fortunately, we are full. And we have been full the entire year.
Lease it for how long?
How long have we been here?
No, how long are the garden beds leased for?
6 months at a time.
Yep.
So, in growing seasons, of which we are entering one on October 1.
Well, we're technically in a season right now.
Right.
We're still in the monsoon growing season.
Right.
So really we don't hit the fall growing season until, I want to say, September, October. For example, right now indoors I have the tomatoes and the peppers that I will set out in September.
Right.
And I also have the brassicas seedlings that I'll transplant today and tomorrow, and those will go out late September, early October.
So you can get a crop in before it gets cold.
Right, but and
here.
Yeah.
And she qualifies everything that she says because things are changing.
Rapidly.
Climate is
Yeah,
changing.
yeah.
Our growing area is changing. We were something called 9B. She'll get into that, but that's going to change.
Yeah.
Shortly. She'll talk about that.
So
anyway, volunteerism. We need you here. Next Saturday, we will have our irrigation. If anybody wants to learn how we irrigate here, we are always welcome people to help.
Oh yes, we do.
And that feels.
No, the hours shift sometimes.
Just pay attention to the website, or we'll figure it out. My other question, I think I'll wait till the end and let you get started, but I have questions about Slack for the gardeners.
Yes.
I want to see how that's going for you, if it's going.
Yes, well.
Because I don't see a lot of gardeners here.
No.
I think that's it.
Okay.
I don't have anybody to bounce off of. If I forgot anything, I always ask somebody. But I'd like to introduce Lorna Spencer. She is one of a couple master gardeners we have here at the site. She's a font of information. How long have you lived in the Phoenix area?
I have lived in Phoenix since 1997 when we used to have a winter.
Yeah.
That's how long I've lived here.
So that's good. And then you lived in Yuma for a while?
Yes, I did. I lived in Yuma, which still cooled off at night when I was there from 2006 till December of 2008. And I came back. But I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
She's not far from here.
Yeah.
And that's why we are a community garden.
Yep.
Community means a lot of different things. So we like to get everybody from this neighborhood here.
Right.
And she's going to talk about our soil types,
Yes.
the issues we have here, the advantages, the challenges,
Yes.
all those things that we have. So let's give a round of applause to Lorna for being here.
Thank you. Really, this was pitched as a soil class, but I also saw it advertised as the fall gardening class. So I'm going to start with the issue of soil, and then I'll go into some things specific to Pearson and our fall garden. For starters, I want to give you guys a definition of what that is, what soil is considered by the definition that was provided by the University of Arizona Master Gardener Manual. So in particular, soil is the unconsolidated mineral and organic matter on the immediate surface of the earth that serves as a medium for the growth of land plants. Organic matter is made up of remains or byproducts of living organisms. So think compost, right? A surface soil ideal for plant growth typically contains approximately 50% solid material and 50% open pore space, because you can't have solid soil and grow plants in it, because we always have to have air in the soil, because air is what allows, and that pore space allows the water to reach the roots of the plants, and plants need a mixture of water and air around their roots to uptake nutrients, okay? So the mineral component is made up of various types and sizes of particles. When we talk about the mineral components, we're talking about the clay that we find here, the caliche, silt particles. So under ideal moisture conditions for growing plants, about half of the soil pore spaces are water filled. Therefore, at any given time, approximately 25% of the total soil volume is air and 25% is water. This balance is, of course, dependent on the amount of water present in the pore spaces, and more rain equals more water in those spaces, and dry periods equal more air and less water. Increasing organic matter content usually increases the water holding capacity. So that's one of the things we're going for. Yes, this is a gross oversimplification of soil structure, and in terms of, I don't want to do that, sit here and shake a jar with particles in it and tell you to look for layers, etc. We're dealing with a raised bed environment here, so wonkish advice is not super practical. Just remember that your soils for growing, especially in the fall season, need to be rich in organic matter and well draining while retaining adequate water to support plant growth. So what I mean by that is that if you have a bed that tends towards having a lot of clay in it, and it feels kind of slick in your hands when it's wet, and it doesn't drain very well, you need to dig compost into it. The same thing if your bed is more on the sandy side and it drains super quickly, so much so that the water is draining out of your bed very quickly and not holding moisture. Again, the remedy being digging in organic matter. So how does this information pertain to your gardening here at Pearson? We view you all, in terms of the gardeners here, and the volunteers to a certain extent, as custodians, soil custodians, right, here at Pearson, which means we encourage you all to understand soil structure and how to improve it in your beds, because you may not be here forever. So we don't try to, this is like being a doctor or a lawyer, in my case. First, do no harm, right? We want you to put your soil together in such a way that you enjoy a fruitful growing experience, because these beds can be very productive. And we also want you to do things that leave your bed in a condition that's great for the next gardener who may come along. So basically you are custodians and stewards, really stewards of these soils, which means we're encouraging you to continue to improve your beds. Your plants are depending on you to learn how the balance of organic matter and nutrients in your beds will give you the results that you desire. In general, given what plants take out of the soil every season, we usually dig 4 to 6 inches of organic matter into these beds. And when I say 4 to 6 inches, I mean on top of the soil level, we're spreading organic matter on top of that and turning it in. And I'll explain that in a bit. But organic matter, in our case, may be compost, it may be composted manure, a mixture of those things. Some people use coco coir. I use that at home in my potting mixes because it's sustainable and it's produced locally here. And there's a source out of Tucson that sells like tanks, green stuff. They produce coco coir for that purpose in Tucson. These are all useful tools to avoid compacted soil structure and to bring nutrients to the soil. The other big part of healthy soils are the microbes that inhabit the soils. That's why we tell the gardeners here to keep their soils watered, to keep their beds watered, even if you're not cultivating it that season. Come by and water every so often, at least every week, or mulched and watered if they're not under cultivation. That keeps the microbes in your soil happy and ready to go, get back to work when it's planting time. Those are things that help your plants take up nutrients, like mycorrhizae rather. You can actually buy some of those. It's some of the things that you may see labeled as inoculants, like for pea vines, etc. You can buy inoculants from gardening supplies. And you also can strictly buy things like the mycorrhizae that you can add to potted plants, you can add to potting mixtures, etc. I do that at home. Things that we don't use at Pearson in our beds. Inorganic things that are not previously approved by leadership. Here's what soils in Arizona tend towards being alkaline. So what we don't like to use are inorganic fertilizers like Miracle Grow or some of the other ones that are available at the big box stores, because those will lead to a buildup of salts in the bed. And because we do not have irrigation in these beds, it is very hard to leach those soils of the salt buildup once you've laid them in there. So we tell people to avoid using that stuff. The other thing we don't do here, any sort of strange chemicals that you may read up on the internet or big box stores, unproven, untested. Really what we try to emphasize here, because we have a number of master gardeners here, and also because of the mission and purpose of KPB, or Keep Phoenix Beautiful, is that we recommend organic sources of nutrients for your beds. Yes, we use organic fertilizer here, and we also recommend the use of things like worm castings, compost. Yes, if you add something like a salt, it's usually magnesium sulfate or Epsom salts, and that is sort of a helper soil amendment to help your plants access the other nutrients in the bed. What I recommend for people to use here is a blend of things in their beds so that your plants are continuously they're receiving nutrition. It's sort of like how you're supposed to eat. You don't eat like a slice of chocolate cake for breakfast. You eat something from each nutrient group, so that you have a low, slow burn from breakfast to lunch. The same thing when you plant these beds. That really, while we do have nitrogen-heavy crops or nitrogen-requiring crops in the fall, because we're primarily growing leaves, some roots, and a few things like peas or fava beans if you plant them, a lot of our stuff is nitrogen-heavy. So by putting in that organic matter, and I dig in some of the organic fertilizer as well, and some worm castings when I set out transplants, your plants really don't need fertilization that much over the course of the growing season. Yes, we use things like fish emulsion here, which is a no-burn organic source of heavy nitrogen. At home, because when I grow seedlings, I use kelp fertilizer, which has a similar profile because I need to get the seedlings up and healthy in enough time to harden them off or acclimate them and get them set out. Things we don't recommend digging into your beds here, not directly, are things like eggshells, coffee grounds, or food scraps. The reason being, these beds are not set up for composting. This is not a big enough bed where you would have, like some people have keyhole gardens at home or are digging food scraps into their gardens at home. Sure, if you have a bigger volume of soil, you're in a better position to not affect the health of your plants, and also to get enough heat working in that source of nitrogen, to let the stuff break down and seep into your beds. Here, these beds are too small for that. The other thing is that we've got random cats roaming through the garden. We got cats. Sometimes we get rogue chickens from next door. So you really don't want anything that's going to draw something into your bed that's going to start eating, or digging and pooping, right? So if you have things like the food scraps, and when I say food scraps, I mean fruit or vegetable matter, not meats, not cheeses, not bones. They go into our composting outfit in the back, and nothing with oils in it. Like if you've got something, a congealed pan of ratatouille at home that's loaded with olive oil, do not throw that in our compost, right? So the other issue that we want to make sure you're clear about is how to work your soil. Don't work your soil when it's wet. That's a biggie, because you destroy the soil structure. Because we have so many clay particles in this soil, what you're really asking for is to end up with a brick or like adobe in your beds. You want to work your soils. They can be moist, but not sopping wet. Put it this way, that's the number one way to harm soil, is working it when it's wet. Like immediately after a rain, give it a couple of days to dry out before you start troubling it. Because if you don't have a lot of organic matter in your soil, you'll start to see clumps that form and dry out, and they look like concrete. You've probably seen this when you dig areas of your yard and you pull stuff out, or workmen come to put something in and they dig a trench, and you see what happens to the earth that comes out of that trench if they dug when it was wet, right? So what we ask that everybody do, that we ask you to do the following for your beds. Turn them every planting season. And when I say turn a bed, start by removing all the hardscape in the bed. If you have trellising in there, if you have stakes in there, if you have plastic plant tags, pull all of that out of the bed, because we don't want to incorporate those things into the soil. And then turn the bed deeply. Before you add anything, turn it down to the bottom of the bed, upwards, and then add your soil amendments and turn it again and turn in those soil amendments, breaking up any clumps. It's not necessary to remove the roots of the plants that were there before, because the roots also have those mycorrhizae around them, and because they're going to be, they're very small in terms of volume, they're not taking up space in your beds. They'll break down organically below the soil surface, and they'll help feed your plants for this coming growing season. So the other recommendations, of course, are to have patience, right? Because that's a biggie here. People are like, because we grew up with the grocery store culture, or if you didn't grow things at home, or your parents didn't grow, or your grandparents didn't grow, a lot of people think it's like, you know, instant. It is not. But we're in late August or mid-August at this point. So what I could recommend in terms of after the soil preparation, you should be thinking about what you're going to be planting the end of this season, like through, I want to say through September 15th, you could still be planting things like beans, right? Bush beans, pole beans. It's time to start considering, you could plant cucumbers now too, because we haven't hit September 15th, although I planted my last volley of cucumbers around, I want to say July 15th at home, and planted another volley of squash. You could also plant summer squash now. What we're going to be planting in roughly 2 months is, and right now you can direct sow things like in a week or two, like right now you could direct sow carrots, you can direct sow green onions. A couple of weeks you could start planting beets, parsnips, and then some people direct sow the brassicas in terms of bok choy, cabbages, etc. in September. I would recommend against it if we're not below 100 degrees. That's a heck of a climate to try and get seedlings up and healthy in. What I recommend in the alternative is what I do, which is to grow the seedlings, or in some case people will buy the seedlings from a nursery and wait until we're a little bit cooler and then set those out. I find that a lot of the newer growers here at the garden do better with seedlings because they're not as unforgiving as seeded or direct sowing things are, because with direct sowing, if you miss a day, there go the seedlings. Poop, they're done in terms of getting fried. So with respect to the choices you should be making when you go to look for seedlings, you should be, first of all, consider our growing climate here. And given warming, picking the right transplants is half the battle if you're going to grow from transplants. So pick healthy transplants, meaning things that are not racetracked around the pots, that are not yellowing, limp, etc., that don't look stunted or weird. Because yeah, sometimes things get through quality control and you'll find them on a shelf and you're like, something's up with this plant, I don't know what it is. Well, if you don't know what it is, leave it right where it is, because you can spread diseases through the wrong transplants, right? But you want to pick things that are slow bolting, heat resistant varieties, because we're still a little bit hot when we first put the transplants out in, say, late September, early October. It's still warm here. It really doesn't get below 100 until October. You also want to look for plants that take the least amount of time to grow. Because of warming, our planting windows have become truncated. They're much shorter than they used to be, and that way, if you plant things that have short seasons, you can get things up and out faster, freeing up the space for your next plantings. Because the other thing we encourage you to do here at Pearson is succession planting for the fall, meaning things that grow quickly like radishes, scallions, lettuces, arugula. Don't plant all of it at once. That's every year we have gardeners that have a bumper crop of one thing, and that's it, because they plant half of their bed in one thing, or they plant the entire bed out at the same time. Because what we encourage you to do is consider square foot gardening, spacing here, and a method. Because this is a raised bed, that these are all 4 by 8, the point of a bed of this size is that you can reach it from all sides of the bed, unless you have an obstruction, but you can reach in. So we don't plant in rows here because rows make no sense. You're not going to go through it with a hoe. It's not an in-ground bed that you have to run a cultivator through. You're going to be able to reach everything with hand tools. So planting closer by square foot method is much easier and much more productive. Also, having your plants close together here will shield the soil from sun, which serves 2 purposes, both to conserve moisture and to help keep the weeds under control. And weeding is that much easier when you don't have a bumper crop of weeds going. We do have Bermuda grass in some of the beds, which has to be dug out because those spread by rhizomes or underground root systems, little snippets of it can spring up. And when you remove the Bermuda grass from your beds, we ask you to please not put it in our compost heap because our compost does not get hot enough to kill off the Bermuda grass. And if you put it in there, you'll end up spreading it through all the beds because we all use the compost from our operation. The same thing with weeds. When we pull weeds, we don't compost them, we throw them out. We bin them and toss them, right? What else would I say is start now in terms of planning your fall garden. What do you want to plant? What does your family like to eat? What do you eat regularly, like every week? What are your deal breakers? What are things you can't stand? Don't plant things you don't like. A lot of people are like, oh, would you take this stuff off my hands? I planted X. We're like, well, why did you plant it if you don't eat it, right? You can plant flowers in these beds as well. And those are very helpful if you are planting things that require pollination. It's very helpful to plant bright colored flowers in the beds to draw the bees in.